Hey everyone. Today I'm hosting Sean Bratston on the podcast. He's a veteran marketer and fractional CMO at Chatterbuzz, among other agencies. With over 20 years experience leading growth teams for agencies and startups, Sean brings a rare mix of sales, strategy, and storytelling. Sean, welcome to the show today.
Hey, Chris, man. Thanks for having me. I love people that do these kind of things. And I love the podcasting world. I listen to a ton, both in my personal life and business. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Hitting the ground running here. I'm curious for you, as operating as a fractional CMO, what typically do you find is the one growth lever that you can come in right away to make all the difference in scaling the agency?
You got the hard hitting question out first. Yeah. Okay. At the end of the day, and I don't want to get academic on you, Chris, but at the end of the day, I teach marketing as well. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is that at the end of the day, marketing serves three purposes, right? So at least in my world, it serves as sales support, right? So how do we support sales? What can we do to give sales data, sales materials, that sort of thing? The next that leads into that from sales support is lead generation, right? And the third is brand awareness. And so if you take those three, the one that I hit on all the time is a lead generation program. An agency needs leads. You got salespeople there. You gotta fill the coffer with leads, and it's something that I'm working with Chatterbuzz a bunch on right now to help them in a high growth period. How do we in a cost effective manner get good leads in the door? And once we solve that problem, then supporting sales. How do we give the sales team everything they need? Case studies, client examples, great marketing materials, videos, podcasts. One of my specialties that you'll probably hear ad nauseum from me, Chris, is I talk a ton about. I love webinars. I love automated webinars. That's kind of one of my skill sets. Shout out to Russ Ruffino from Clients on Demand for teaching me this system. You know Russ? Do you know Russ?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know Russ? Okay.
Old
Yeah.
school Russ.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Shout out to Russ Ruffino, man. He taught me the value of the webinar, the automated webinar, almost 15 years ago at this point. And I still use this system. I still love automated webinars for educating, potential clients, nurturing leads, getting people in the door, getting your message out there in a long format, which is really hard nowadays, right? To get any kind of message out there in a long, non-YouTube short, TikTok format, it's a little bit, Facebook Reels is a little bit tough these days. And so I do love that's kind of one of my secret weapons when it comes to marketing. But, if we think about it, it all starts with lead generation. I mean, let's call it what it is, right? Like you got to, just like we build marketing programs for customers, and the very first thing we think about is how do they get customers in the door? Yeah. So, I start with that. Brand awareness to me, I'm not putting it on the back burner. It's wonderful to have. It's great to have a great brand, but man, at the end of the day, we have to all make revenue targets, right? And so we got to get people in the door. Lead flow is king. Lead flow is king. You're right.
And I find it really interesting, Sean, because when we connected previously, you mentioned that you have a lot of sales background and sales experience as well. So taking that and combining it with your role as, the CMO or fractional CMO inside of some of these companies, how has that helped you?
Oh, man, I tell you what, I can give you a couple different experiences. So just to give you a little bit about my background, I started out in Washington, D.C. I was with a company called Agency Q, and they're still a great agency out of the Washington, D.C. area. Shout out to Sean Breen, who runs that agency. I was actually just talking to him a couple of days ago. And so they're more of a marketing agency now, but they were originally a web design shop when I started there. And I started in sales. And so I started just basically, that's back in the day when we had to code, maybe release days, we had to code every single web project from scratch. We had to scope it. And so it was a fascinating sales job because I didn't just sell a package or anything like that. We basically had to custom scope. And as a salesperson, I had to custom scope every single website. We would do mock-ups for clients before the sales process was even over. It was a different time. We built CRM systems from scratch. We built CMS systems from scratch. It was a tough time back in the day. But I learned the ins and outs of the technology around marketing apparatuses that way. So I know how websites are built. I know how CRM systems operate. I know how CMS systems work. And so it was a great background, first of all, on the understanding, just from my personal experience, from understanding some of the really kind of intricacies of marketing, but also understanding the plight of a salesperson. And then I moved from there to another company called Synergy, which recently sold, well, recently, I guess, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, sold. I'm getting old, so recently sounds a lot different nowadays in my head. But no, they sold to KPMG, and we were very successful there. I think our revenue was 1.6 when I got there. 5 years later, I was running marketing. It was 40, 42, 45 million, something like that. Very successful company. They were an experience agency. Started out as a RIA company, rich internet applications. Then went to a user experience company, and then that became an experience kind of customer experience agency. A great company, great folks there. And when I got there, I kind of figured out that as I built our marketing program, sales and marketing didn't talk to each other. And most of our salespeople didn't really have a good experience with marketing. And so, I kind of made it one of my missions there to, I started having weekly calls with the leader of sales, and at first it was, and if Rick George is listening to this, he'll know what we're talking about. But sorry, Rick, for admitting this, but at first it was just therapy sessions in between sales and marketing, sales bitching about leads, marketing bitching about sales and not closing deals and stuff like that. But we, over a period of months, we got in sync, about what the needs of sales were. And then I was able to accomplish those couple missions that I just said a second ago. Sales support. Yeah, I'm going to keep coming back to this, Chris. I'm a broken record sometimes when it comes to these things, when it comes to marketing stuff, because I teach it. Sales support, lead generation, brand awareness, right? And we fed the heck out of that sales team and generated a ton of business, judging by the growth, obviously, in the acquisition. And so, man, sales and marketing's got to talk to each other. I mean, for anybody out there who's listening to this, let me just give you a word of warning. If you're a marketer, and especially if you're a top level marketer, if you're at the top of the food chain in marketing in your organization, if you don't have a good relationship with sales, you're not doing things right. You really aren't. You got to have a great relationship with sales. You guys should be hanging out, going to dinner, having drinks together, whatever it is. You guys need to be talking all the time. You need to understand, a marketer has to understand from sales what you're providing them and what the impact of that is, right? And I know it can be some of the most, I'll tell you what, we've had some of the most frustrating conversations with that, but it's so important. Like I remember in a kind of a shouting match back in the day, telling some of the sales guys, I was like, look, I don't have lead quality handles to pull. I was like, I can put more money in, I can optimize things better and get you more leads, but there's no magic button that I have for lead quality. And by the way, that nowadays we can control a little bit more with content and relevant content, stuff like that. But what I'm referring to is back in the days when we depended on running $25,000 worth of, PPC ads, every week, that sort of thing. And I was like, guys, they're like, well, I just need better lead quality. I was like, I don't have a lever for that. I was like, guys, I got a lever for all these different things. But having those conversations allowed sales to understand that, right? And so then they understood that, hey, I could turn up the volume, but they are going to have to deal with more kind of ash and trash and just kind of, get the chaff out try to get the wheat. But I think it was always very valuable for me as a marketer to be able to walk in the room and said, I've lived in your shoes. I've been a salesperson. I was like, I actually liked being a salesperson. The people around me did not like me as a salesperson during those days. I wasn't a good human being when I was a salesperson. I'm too competitive. I'm too just focused on the deal and just, that sort of thing. So my family is a lot happier as me as a marketer, but it's always great to be able to walk in that room, man. Anybody who's in marketing, if you've never been in sales, I highly encourage those people to at least spend time with the salespeople, understand it, understand the plight, ask questions, man, be inquisitive, find out what leads are working. It's not just empirical data either, it's anecdotal. Like I love the anecdotal stories from the sales team. I wanted to hear about every deal. I wanted to hear every single sales deal went right, sales deal went wrong. And I'd go back there with my notebook and I'd go back and look at the lead that it came from. I'd look at the campaign, and you've got to have that you've got to be inquisitive like that. Does that make sense? You got to be inquisitive like that as a marketer. I tell people all the time, being inquisitive is one of the best traits you can have as a marketer.
100% agree with everything you said. And I will die on that sword with you, Sean.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, you and I can go down on that ship together, right, brother? Yeah. I mean, look, you got to be curious. You got to be intellectually curious to be successful in a lot of things in life, but marketing especially is an area. Like, You got to keep up to date. You got to be intellectually curious. You got to ask questions. And you have to wonder why. I'm annoying to watch TV with nowadays because I take apart every commercial. I spent some time in online advertising, and I spent some time in the advertising world. So man, I watch every single, I can't even watch the Super Bowl. Good Lord, those commercials drive me crazy because they're just wasting money and I'm asking why. And yeah, but no, you got to be intellectually curious in marketing. And I think it's important.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think in sales as well, it's important to be curious. Oh, speaking of sales, what does the current sales process look for you guys? How do you go from stranger to paying client?
Okay. Let's see. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, at the end of the day, most of the companies I've been at, we follow a pretty rigid process. I think Chatterbuzz is no different. We've got a sales team of a couple people. They're what you call client success specialists. So they're not your typical just churn and burn salespeople. So we put out content. Obviously, we put out advertisements. We cast a little bit of wide net. One thing that I like about Chatterbuzz is they're not dependent on one thing. Right. So we do networking. A couple of weeks ago, I was with one of our client success specialists over at Chamber of Commerce, and him and I were just old school pressing the flesh at a breakfast meeting, out in Pasco County, Florida, but also we do the digital stuff. We do automated webinars. We do podcasts. We do video. And so we cast a pretty wide net to try to figure out how to target our ICPs, but also the people that just might be interested in working with us, And by the way, as a marketer, I'll be transparent here. I struggle with that a little bit. We talk about account-based management and stuff like that and account-based marketing. Look, I love, finding an ICP, a digital customer profile, and just targeting in on that one profile. On the other hand, I like to cast a pretty wide net from a brand awareness standpoint. I like to tell people and speak to the world about our agency and tell them, because I know that marketing can help all different flavors of business, right? I've never been vertical, and especially in cybersecurity. But other than that, I've never been vertical focused. I mean, I've worked with product companies, B2B companies, a ton of B2B companies. I've worked with startups, big companies, from the 2-person, gaming company that I help out of Texas to Marriott hotels and resorts. I've worked with every type of client, and marketing is applicable to all of them. And the skill set of marketing is useful for all those companies because there's almost always, I rarely ever walk into a company where they don't need some sort of help with marketing. That's one thing. There's one consistency over 21 years of doing this. I rarely ever walk into a company and go, yeah, you guys probably don't need any marketing help. It's like, there's always something that we could be doing, something that we could do better, faster, more cost efficient, that sort of.
Got it. It's really interesting, Sean, that you mentioned that you guys have a sales team. I think a lot of marketing agencies and marketers, they're trying to remove themselves from sales, or they've had some horror stories, trying to bring on sales team members. So I'm curious, what is the secret sauce that you guys figured out over there? Because not many agencies, most agencies are founder led. And obviously the good ones figure out how to remove the founder and build and scale that way.
Chris, you were hitting on an agency problem that I've seen, even going back to the agency Q example that I gave you from Washington, D.C. That was a company at the time, it's been almost 20 years now. That was a company at the time that had very strong founders, Sean Bratston, Tim O'Neill, and Tim's still a really close friend of mine. Like I said, I just talked to Sean the other day, so I've known these guys forever. And man, the struggle was they brought in at that period of time 90, 100% of the revenue, the business. And you can't scale that way, right? You can't have founder-led sales, and you can't have principal-led sales, I guess is the best way for us to call it. And it is such a tough, it's maybe one of the toughest transitions in business that I've ever seen. I think it's harder to get a company to go from founder and principal-led sales to sales team than it probably is to grow from 25 to 50 million. I mean, honestly, if I had to pick a challenge, I'd pick the easier one, which would be, revenue growth like that. I think that, so, okay, I'll give you, I don't know that I have a secret sauce, but I'll give you two important things. I think one is the founders have to start trusting people, and they have to, I'll give you a great example. Tim O'Neill, shout out to Tim. He'll watch this podcast, one of my good friends. He now runs an agency called 45 RPM up in Washington, D.C. as well. And Tim put his trust in me as a young 26-year-old salesperson, and Tim taught me how to write proposals. He taught me how to handle meetings, how to ask the right questions. I mean, Tim was very hands-on with me early in my career, is why he was in my wedding, one of my good friends, and has been for 30 years. I call him a mentor. But because Tim could let go with me and then let me handle things, it empowered me. So, empowering your employees is first. The second thing is, let's go back to marketing. You got to feed those people, right? You got to give them leads. You got to give them actionable leads. You can't just you can't take a 26-year-old, kid basically. And now that I'm old enough, I can call 26-year-olds kids. You can't take a 26-year-old and just let them and say, hey, go get me some business, right? You have to have a lead gen program in place. You've got to have, you got to have a little bit of a brand. You got to have stories to tell. You have to have things, that are repeatable for those people too, right? Like you have to, and then I was there for a while, and after being there for a while, I was leading sales, and then it was my turn at that point. Then I was 28, mentoring and trying to help 21-year-old salespeople. And, and you have to have that trust. And I failed early on because I did not have enough trust in the younger people working in sales. I got over that eventually, and we were successful, but man, you got to spend time with those people. And some principals do it great, but others really struggle with it. And so, I think it's a combination of the principals needing to understand that they need to empower people. They can't do this. They cannot take on. Yeah, I've never seen an agency that can grow successfully past a certain point with just principal-led sales. It just doesn't scale. The principal gets burned out, and the organization's better for it, right? Like, you have different voices. At Chatterbuzz, we've got Steven, who's a little bit of a younger salesperson. He's going to be a rock star one day. I love spending time with him, and we do some networking stuff together. And then Grace is a little bit more experienced, and she spent a ton of time with Shaylin, our founder. She's a rock star already. Great tier 1 clients. She's great with networker and just a total rock star. Shout out to Grace. And, but we got a good blend there, and the founders of, especially the founder, Shaylin of Chatterbuzz, spends a lot of time with those folks. And Shaylin's also committed to generating leads. And how do we create a lead generation program? Be on the phone with her at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, talking about just that. But no, I think it's that commitment from the founders to get past that point, because it's a blocker. I mean, you've probably seen it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Those are two golden nuggets. I think that if anybody just took those two pieces away from this conversation, I think it would be invaluable for them.
If you guys keep that out of this conversation, we're doing our jobs, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. Something you mentioned, Sean, I'm curious about. So are the sales reps acting as account managers? So do they stay with the client after the initial, contract signed, proposal, all of that, the sales process, or are they passing off to account executives or something like that?
Okay, great question. So I've seen it both ways. In my early career, I saw the salesperson becomes the account manager and they keep it on there. And I loved that earlier in my career, but then I saw the downfalls of that. One, it takes them away from selling. Two, I don't think the best salespeople are the best account managers. I will be brutally honest. I was a very good salesperson. I'm probably considered an exceptional marketer. I am a terrible account manager. Don't make me an account manager. It's just not something. I don't have the diligence for it. I don't have I love to tell stories and close deals and bring in business, and it's not right for me. And so, and I think that there's probably a lot of salespeople and a lot of marketers, definitely a lot of salespeople. Like, I don't know a lot of salespeople that'd be good account managers. So I prefer the model where the salesperson sells, they have a good, clean handoff to the execution team. The execution team then goes, creates, now with that said, I think something that Chatterbuzz does really well is that I think that there needs to be some bridge in that whole process too, which is one of the roles that I serve in these type of things, which is as either an FCMO with organizations that don't have marketing leadership, or on the project side, a strategist. I think I think that goes by the wayside a lot of times. That marketing needs strategy. Marketing has always been, as you and I talked about the other day, it's always been a blend of strategy and execution, right? But doesn't work without one, doesn't work without the other, right? I can make all the strategies in the world. If I don't have an execution team or somebody that can execute on that, then it's all for naught. On the other hand, if I've seen so many organizations that have 2 or 3 people executing on things all day long, and they're not getting a damn thing done. Sorry for my language, but they're not getting a darn thing done because they don't have the right strategy in place, right? They have to be together. They have to work in tandem. It's one of the things that I love about Chatterbuzz. They do a great job of that. Shaylin's kind of the senior strategist overall, which I think is a great role for a founder of a company. But most people in the business can talk strategy, and that's fantastic. I serve that role as well too, with helping with strategies. I think that it's one of the things that Chris, I've always loved about the fractional CMO model. I don't know if you're going to talk about that anymore, but the fractional CMO model, it is great because it provides clients with a strategic voice like myself that can talk to the C-level executives in the company. I'm comfortable talking to the CEO. I can talk to the board if you're private equity owned or if you're VC backed. I can talk to those folks. I can talk to investors. I can have the finance conversation with the CFO. I can have the strategy conversation with the CEO. I can talk, execution with the COO, whatever we need to do, right? That's just something I picked up over my career. But I think that's where that role, so you got to have some sort of strategy component in there. It's one of the things I love about what Chatterbuzz.
That makes a ton of sense. And I can tell that you're really passionate about that. So
I love this stuff. Hey, I finally found something in my life I'm good at.
given that,
There's many years when I was younger, I wasn't sure about that, but no,
I think
I
we've
love
all been there. We've all been there.
right.
So I'm curious, Sean, given that like you guys are really focused on strategy and execution, what does Chatterbuzz look like at the next level? Like, where are you guys driving to?
Well, I think there's a couple ways to answer that, Chris. I think one is that so Chatterbuzz's current state is as a leading firm in the Central Florida area. So you take Orlando, Tampa, that corridor there. I think there's some geographic reach that can be accomplished. I think an agency like this needs to, we've got a presence in New York City. We've got a little bit of a presence in South Florida, Miami. I think that the first expansion can be geographic, right? It's an agency that can work with pretty much any vertical. So I think that opens up a lot of doors, right? Yeah. And we've had these conversations internally. Do you want to specialize? Do you want to, I think I'm comfortable working in a lot of different environments, but I do have specialties in a couple of environments. I've worked in a ton of venture-backed firms. I've worked in, as I mentioned, cybersecurity. We have folks internal with Chatterbuzz that are great with SaaS companies, B2B, B2C, and so I'm never a big, and Shaylin may correct me at some point, but this is not a Chatterbuzz opinion. It's just my opinion. I'm comfortable with marketing in pretty much any vertical situation. So to me, expansion looks probably geographic. I mean, this is a firm that could, they could very easily, I'm very high on them. They could very easily, be the leading marketing, strategy and execution firm in the entire state of Florida. And I wouldn't be in 5 years if we weren't a regional powerhouse. And the next step after regional, it's like the dance competition for the kids or something. It's like regionals becomes nationals, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think one of the things I've learned, Chris, over the years is you walk in the door of an agency and you start to look at the people, and you go have those first conversations with the people, and pretty quickly, like, okay, these people have the stuff, or Chatterbuzz has the goods, as they would say, as the young kids would say, and they've got the right attitude, the right mindset. They're great with clients. I think that's it's a key thing everybody kind of forgets at some point. It's still, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the clients. I'll give you a quote. One of my very first mentors, she, I think since passed away, but I worked for a company that I was a recruiter. I worked for a company up in Fort Meade, Maryland, next to the NSA. And I worked with a lady named Margaret Mix, who was a brilliant woman who was an ex-CIA spy, but she was also she was an engineer, and she had guided the projects of several major software endeavors, including the Washington, D.C. metro system, the National Weather Service's hurricane tracking system. So she had worked on some big deal technology projects. And I sat in a meeting with her one day, and one of the very first lessons she ever taught me, she looked across at me, and we just there's some problems with customers. She said, "Sean, I just need you to," because I know what it was. I spoke out of turn, and I said, "Well, the customer's always right, right?" She whips over and she goes, "Customer's not always right. The customer is always the customer." I said, "Okay." She said, "Do you get that? Think about it for a second." I said, I think I was 22, Chris, when this happened. I think I was 22 years old. I said, "Customer's not always right. The customer's always the customer." "Okay. All right." She's right. I've been saying that now for almost 30 years now. 28 years I've been saying that. And Margaret Mix from a company called Comsto up in the DC area. Yeah, she was right. I mean, the customer's not always right, but the customer's always the customer. You treat them like that. You treat them well. And then one of the things that I learned from the guys at Agency Q years ago, going back to this guy, Tim O'Neill, one of the things I loved about Tim always had no problem having the tough conversation with the client.
Mhm.
And I think he almost got juiced on it sometimes having that, he was never rattled by that. He was never, and one of the things that I loved about him and he taught me is we get if you're three emails deep with a client, stop. You pick up the phone, call them. I know a lot of young people nowadays, if they're listening to this, they'll probably be like, what? Pick up the phone, call somebody. No, we don't WhatsApp them. We don't Snapchat them. We don't, go on Facebook and complain or anything like that. We pick up the phone. We call people. We have the tough conversations. And I think over the years, man, clients respect you so much when you have those tough conversations. When you've been through the wars, like I had a client at Marriott, man, that was tough. And I used to just, because, our office in DC was close to the Marriott headquarters. And I'd go meet this guy, Joe, up there. Shout out to Joe Schwinger. I know I'm getting a lot of shout outs, but I know people will see this. So, Joe, I love you, but you were a pain in my ass back in the day. But I used to have to go up and work with our hardest client. And over the years, and I saw him, the last time I saw him was a couple of years ago, way after the time that we worked. I saw him in New York City at the Marriott Marquis Hotel. And Joe gave me a big hug and loved me and respected me because I had the hard conversations with him. I never shied away from that moment. Never shy away from those client interactions. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if this is marketing talk, but yeah, it's agency talk, right?
For sure. I think it's invaluable.
Agencies are just a very trusted partner for organizations. That can be, if you're in-house, that can be your best friends. I mean, I've hired and fired agencies for my marketing career dozens of times. And, it always comes down to the client interaction, how they deal with problems when shit hits the fan. How do we deal with things together? How do we work through problems together? How's that partnership? And that's never really changed. I don't think that'll ever change, right?
No, I mean, it has to be a collaboration. So totally agree with you there. I think
All the CRM systems, all the fancy reporting in the world doesn't hold a candle to picking up the phone and talking to a client.
the human element, there's a human behind all the numbers, all behind the business, all of it. So I love that. Getting ready to wrap up here, Sean, because technology is moving so fast and AI, especially with the advancement of AI, this space is insane. How are you leveraging AI? And then how are you guys leveraging AI inside of Chatterbuzz?
So I am a advocate I've written 2 books on the subject. One book called AI for the Small Business Owners that help teach small businesses about how to use AI and how to leverage it for content marketing and operations. I wrote another one called AI Marketing Genius, which was all about how marketers should be able to leverage AI as well too. The first thing, guardrails. I have a very important guardrail, and anybody who's listening to this, who's using AI and trying to use AI for marketing, content development, stuff like that, I love it. If AI has changed my life personally for being able to create content, but everything that AI creates has to have human eyes on it. Period. That's a rule, folks. If you're not following that rule, yeah, that's a rule. And if you're not following that rule, then you're going to screw something up, and it's not good. Like I've been creating AI content for about 3 or 4 years now, and I've never sent a piece of content out. I've actually have done content development projects with folks to develop. And by the way, it's fantastic. I mean, we can take a decent piece of content, you can soup it up with AI, you can edit it with AI. I love things that, like, you can change the voice with AI, right? So we can change the voice to a different customer set, to a different potential ICP. We can change I work with a nurse staffing company right now that I mentioned a little bit earlier. With the nurse staffing company, I was able to take some content and I said, no, this piece of content needs to be rewritten for doctors. Boom, put it into AI. It's rewritten in a voice that's perfect for doctors. This needs to speak to nurses. Boom, rewrote it. Okay, cool. This needs to speak to patients. Boom. And the time that it took that was about the time of this podcast. And if I would have worked with a writer, it would have taken weeks, if not months. The scale of what you can do with content is amazing with AI. To be honest with you, I have not gone too deep into some of the automations around advertising. Makes me, as a former advertiser, makes me a tad nervous about, that taking over. And by the way, I've been so lucky, Chris. I've always worked with incredible advertising folks. I'll give a shout out to one more company. There's a company called Delta V Digital out of the Washington, D.C. area. They're great specialists at PPC management, SEO programs, stuff like that. And I've been so lucky, Chris, that I've worked with some of the best in that business. Chatterbuzz has an incredible organization with folks that do, great PPC SEO management, things like that. I've been so lucky to work with the humans on that side that I don't know that I quite trust the technology yet, but I think we're getting there, right? I think there's some stuff there that can be done. I think with lead generation, all about, trying to, using AI to data mine. I've got a good friend here in the area who has a company that uses AI for a lot of sales work. And he's got some examples of sales work. It's the first that I've kind of seen where the chat bots respond to things and they're all AI driven and they seem to get really good results. I think we're moving that direction really quickly. I'm not 100% sold, but I'm getting pretty close. I think for lead generation, for outreach, I think we're pretty much there yet. And to answer your question about Chatterbuzz, we got some. I can't give away the secret sauce on the agency side quite yet, but we got some tricks up our sleeves. We're looking heavily. Let me just say, we're looking heavily at AI to do things like lead generation, initial outreach. I think AI has a real place there until the fact that I want Steve, myself, or Grace to get a phone call and I want to be on that first phone call, right?
Yeah.
I don't want AI having my first point with a client. Where are you on AI right now? I should ask you that question.
I'm with you from a sales perspective. I think it's not there yet. And I think that humans still buy from humans, especially for high level partnerships, high ticket service based stuff. Maybe lower ticket. I think AI can sell that. But from a high ticket service based relationship, partnership based business, Sean, getting ready to wrap up here, where can people find out more about you? Because I know you operate as a fractional CMO. You have a consultancy. You support many levels businesses, but then also you're working with Chatterbuzz and helping them
Yeah.
grow.
So a couple different things. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sean Bratston, SHAWN, BRO, X as in X-ray, S as in Sam, ON. You'll find me on LinkedIn that way. I'm pretty easy. I'm fairly easy to find almost anywhere on the net. There's not a lot of Sean Braxtons out there in the world I've ever found. So, and then you can also, I've got my own personal website at www.1560FIFTENSIXTY. And for those of you that don't know, 1560 AD was the very first year the term marketing was ever found historically.
Right.
1560 AD in England. So yeah, so 1560.com. You can Google my name, Sean Braxton. You can find me. You can also find me at Chatterbuzz Media, chatterbuzzmedia.com. And reach out to us if we can help you guys with anything on the marketing side.
Awesome. Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Hey, Chris, I really appreciate it. It's fun. I could do 3 more hours on this.
I was going to say, we could keep
I could
going.
talk all day with you about this kind of stuff, as you can tell. Look, I love this stuff. It's my love in life. And so, like I said, it's the one thing I might be good at. We'll see. Jury's still out.
To be continued.
Yes, TBD on that.
Episode 2. Yeah.